The question hung in the frozen Montana air like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. What could drive two young women to walk willingly into a blizzard, knowing they might never see morning? What terror could be worse than death by cold? December 15, 1882, the wind screamed across the plains with the voice of 1,000 demons, hurling snow like tiny blades against anything foolish enough to stand in its path. Visibility had dropped to nothing. The temperature had plunged to 20 degrees below zero, and somewhere in that white hell, two identical figures stumbled forward, their thin dresses already stiffening with ice. Mei Chen could no longer feel her feet. Each step was an act of faith, trusting that her legs still moved beneath her, that the ground still existed below the endless white. Her sister Lin walked half a step ahead, one hand gripping Mei's wrist with desperate strength, the other stretched out blindly before them. Lin, Mei's voice was barely a whisper stolen by the wind the moment it left her frozen lips. I can't see my feet anymore. Lin didn't answer, couldn't answer. To speak was to open her mouth to the killing cold, to let it slide down her throat and freeze her from the inside. She simply tightened her grip on her sister's wrist and pulled forward, though she had no idea if they were walking toward salvation or deeper into the wilderness. How had it come to this? The answer lay 2 hours behind them in the labor camp. They'd fled, and 7 years before that in promises made across an ocean. The camp. Even now, as hypothermia began its seductive work, Mei could see it clearly. Northern Pacific Railroad's labor station, 15 miles east of what would someday be Billings, not the gleaming promise of America they'd been sold in Guangdong, not the household service for a wealthy family the labor broker had described. Just endless laundry for 300 men, bent backs over scalding water and lye soap hands raw and bleeding, sleeping in unheated barracks that stank of mildew and despair. Tobias Cray. The name itself was a curse. 250 pounds of cruelty wrapped in sweat-stained flannel, a scar running from temple to jaw like a mark of Cain. The foreman who owned their contract. Who owned them? Mei stumbled. Her knees hit the snow, and for one blessed moment it felt almost warm, like a bed, like rest. No, Lin's voice cut through the wind's howl. She yanked Mei upright with strength, born of pure terror. We survived together, always together, always together. It had been their promise since childhood, whispered between them in the darkness of their shared room in Guangdong. When their mother died birthing them, when their father, a learned man reduced to poverty by war, had made the impossible choice to send his daughters to the Gold Mountain. When the ship had pitched and rolled for 60 days across the Pacific, and they'd held each other through the sickness and the fear. 7 years. Years of invisible chains of Tobias's leering eyes following Mei across the laundry yard, of his hands that found excuses to brush against her. Of the day 6 months ago when those hands had grabbed and Lin had struck him across the face with a wooden paddle. 3 days in the coal bin for that. 3 days in absolute darkness while Mei had pounded on the door until her hands bled screaming, until her voice died. Seamus O'Brien had saved them, the Irish laborer with kind eyes and a ready laugh who'd taught Lin English in stolen moments, who'd whispered the warning 3 nights ago. Tobias sold 2 Chinese girls to a brothel in Butte last month. You're next. He's already made the arrangement. And so they'd run, joined a wagon train heading west. 3 days of blessed hope that they might actually escape. Until Mei had woken in the night to use the privy and heard the men talking. 3 voices, cold and calculating, discussing the price Chinese girls could fetch in Virginia City. $200 each. Easy money. They'd stolen a horse that night. 1 horse between them riding double into the darkness. The shots behind them. The horses panic when the storm hit, throwing them into a snowbank before galloping away into the white void. Now this. Walking blind, hand in hand, waiting for the cold to claim what was rightfully theirs after 7 years of stolen life. A light flickered in the distance. May saw it first, a warm orange glow that seemed to pulse with her fading heartbeat. Hallucination surely, the mind's last gift before the darkness. Lynn. She could barely form the word, light. Lynn saw it too. For a moment neither sister moved, afraid that to acknowledge it would make it vanish. Then Lynn pulled May forward with renewed desperation. 50 yards, 40, 30, the light grew stronger. Not a hallucination. Real. A lantern held high, cutting through the storm like a beacon. A figure emerged from the white chaos. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy buffalo coat. A man on horseback, the animal's breath steaming in the frigid air. Every instinct screamed danger. Their years at the camp had taught them what men wanted, what men took. But the cold left no choice. They stumbled forward, two frozen ghosts materializing before the stranger. "Don't move." The voice was deep, commanding, but not cruel. "I'm here to help." May's legs gave out. She crumpled into the snow, pulling Lynn down with her. They huddled together as they'd done 1,000 times before, arms wrapped tight, waiting for whatever came next. Death or deliverance. The man dismounted. His boots crunched through the snow as he approached, lantern held high. In its glow they could see his face, weathered late 30s, or perhaps 40, with a neatly trimmed beard going gray at the edges. Eyes the color of a summer sky, wide with shock and concern. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "How long have you been out here?" Neither sister answered, couldn't answer. Their teeth chattered too violently for speech. The stranger knelt before them, moving slowly as one might approach a frightened animal. "Can you hear me? I'm going to help you. My name is Ezra Morgan. I have a cabin 3 miles from here. Warmth, food, safety. But you have to trust me. Can you do that?" May tried to speak. Her frozen lips managed only 2 words thick with accent and terror. "Please don't kill us." The man recoiled as if struck. Something passed across his face, pain mixed with anger, though not directed at them, understanding perhaps of what they must have endured to expect death before kindness. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "I promise you that. On my life, I promise." He shrugged out of his buffalo coat, heavy and warm-smelling of leather and wood smoke. Without asking permission, he enfolded both sisters in it, cocooning them together. The warmth was shocking, almost painful against their frozen skin. "Come on now," Ezra said. "Let's get you up. My horse is strong. He can carry all of us." With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he lifted May, first settling her onto the saddle of a magnificent black stallion. Then Lynn, positioning her behind her sister's arms, locked around May's waist. He swung up behind them both, one arm circling them to hold the reins, the other keeping them steady. "His name is Thunder," Ezra said, as much to keep them conscious as to inform. "Had him 8 years. Best horse in Montana Territory. He'll get us home." Thunder moved forward at a steady walk, Ezra leading him on foot through the snow. The wind still howled, the cold still bit, but wrapped in the buffalo coat, and sheltered somewhat by Ezra's bulk, the sisters felt the first fragile thread of hope. Ezra began to sing, low and quiet, a cowboy song about home and hearth, about finding shelter after a long trail. His voice was untrained, but warm, and it gave them something to focus on besides the killing cold, something human in the inhuman storm. May didn't remember the rest of the journey. Cold and exhaustion claimed her consciousness, and she drifted in a gray space between waking and sleeping. She was vaguely aware of Lynn's grip tightening whenever she started to slip sideways, of Ezra's voice sometimes singing, sometimes speaking softly to his horse, of the wind's gradual softening as they descended into some kind of valley, then warmth, sudden and overwhelming. May's eyes fluttered open to find herself inside a cabin laid on a rough-hewn floor near a stone fireplace where flames danced and crackled. Lynn was beside her, already cocooned in blankets. A large yellow dog with graying muzzle stood over them both, tail wagging uncertainly. Easy there, Ezra said, kneeling beside them with 2 tin cups. Don't try to stand yet. Drink this, slowly. Ginger tea. May could smell it before it touched her lips, sharp and warming. Ezra held the cup steady as she drank, his hand never wavering, even when hers shook so badly she nearly knocked it away. The hot liquid burned down her throat, but it was a good burn, a living burn. Only when both sisters had emptied their cups did Ezra stand and turn his back. "There are dry clothes on the bench behind you," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll step outside while you change. Take your time." The door closed softly behind him, and for the first time since leaving China, May and Lynn were alone in a room with a man and felt no fear. They helped each other out of their frozen dresses with fumbling, clumsy fingers. The dry clothes Ezra had left were enormous men's flannel shirts that hung to their knees, wool socks that reached their thighs. But they were soft and warm and clean, and when May pulled the shirt over her head, she found it smelled like soap and sunshine. "Sister," Lynn whispered in their native Cantonese. "Can we trust him?" May looked around the cabin. One room maybe 20 feet square, a bed in one corner neatly made, a small table with 2 chairs, shelves holding books, actual books, their spines worn with reading. Above the fireplace, a faded sepia photograph of a blonde woman holding an infant, both smiling at whoever held the camera. "I don't know," May answered honestly. "But he could have left us to die. He didn't." A knock at the door. "May I come in?" "Yes." May called her English heavily accented but clear. Ezra entered carrying more blankets and a pot of something that smelled rich and savory. He'd taken off his wet outer layers and now wore a simple work shirt and canvas pants. Without the bulk of his coat, May could see he was leaner than she'd thought, broad in the shoulders, but with the wiry build of a man who worked hard every day. He set the pot on the table and ladled thick stew into 2 bowls. "Venison," he explained, setting the bowls before them. "Killed the deer yesterday. It's good and hot. Eat slow, or you'll make yourself sick." Neither sister needed to be told twice. They ate carefully, methodically, tasting real meat for the first time in months. The camp had fed them rice and cabbage, sometimes fish, so old it stank. This was rich and fatty and perfect. Ezra sat in the 3rd chair, the dog settling at his feet. He didn't eat, just watched them with an expression May couldn't quite read. Concern, certainly, curiosity, but also something deeper, sorrow perhaps. When they'd finished, when the bowls were scraped clean and their hands had finally stopped shaking, Ezra spoke. "I'll need to know your names," he said gently, "and where you came from. Not tonight if you're not ready, but eventually. Because in about an hour, this storm will let up enough for smoke to be seen for miles, and if someone's looking for you, they'll come here. I need to know what I'm dealing with." Lynn and May exchanged glances. Years of caution, of keeping silent, of making themselves invisible, but this man had saved their lives. He'd wrapped them in his own coat, brought them to his home, fed them from his own stores. They owed him truth. "I am May Chun," May said softly. "This is my sister Lynn. We are twins. We came from Guangdong province in 1875 when we were 18. We were promised work in American household. Instead, we were sold to Northern Pacific Railroad as laundry workers. We have been there ever since." The foreman, Lynn added her English rougher than May's, but understandable. "Tobias Cray, bad man. He kept our papers, kept our wages. Said we owe money for boat from China, $600. We work 7 years' debt, grows larger." Ezra's jaw tightened. "That's called peonage. It's illegal. Has been since 1867. "We do not know American law," May said. "We know only work and run." "Why now?" Ezra asked. "That's a long time to endure. Why escape now?" The sisters looked at each other. Some memories were too painful for words, but Lynn lifted her chin, meeting Ezra's eyes with unexpected defiance. "He touched my sister," she said flatly. "Try to force her. I hit him. He locked me in coal bin 3 days. No light. No food. When I come out, he says next time he sell us both. Brothel in Virginia City, $200 each. Ezra's hands clenched into fists on the table. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, but May could hear the fury underneath. And the people who were chasing you, the ones you stole the horse from. Wagon train, May explained. We pay them to take us west, hide among families, but we hear men talking. They plan to sell us too. Different brothel. We take horse, run into storm. Jesus, Ezra breathed. He stood abruptly pacing to the window. Outside, the storm was indeed beginning to break, the wind's howl dropping to a moan. You've been running from slavers into the arms of slavers. We know, Lynn said quietly. America is not what Father told us, but is too late to go back. Ezra turned to face them. In the firelight, his face was grave but not unkind. You can stay here, he said, until the storm fully passes, until you're strong enough to travel. I have a spare room. Well, a storage alcove. I can clear it out. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. We have no money, May said, the shame of it burning her cheeks. I didn't ask for money, Ezra replied. I'm offering shelter, that's all. No strings, no debts. Just basic human decency, which seems to be in short supply around here. He moved to a small shelf and pulled down a framed photograph, the same one May had noticed earlier. He stared at it for a long moment before speaking. This was my wife, Sarah, he said softly, and our son, Daniel. They died 5 years ago, childbirth. She went first, then the baby 6 hours later. He set the photograph down carefully, as if it might shatter. I know what it's like to lose everything, to be alone in a place that doesn't care if you live or die. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. May felt tears prick her eyes, not for herself, but for this stranger who'd lost so much and still found room in his heart for 2 desperate refugees. We are grateful, she said, the words inadequate for the depth of her feeling. Very grateful. Get some sleep, Ezra said, moving toward the door. I'll be in the barn checking on the horses. The dog's name is Rusty. He won't hurt you. In fact, he'll probably try to sleep on your feet. Fair warning. As if on cue, Rusty lumbered over to the pile of blankets where the sisters had settled and flopped down across their ankles, a warm, heavy presence that was surprisingly comforting. Ezra paused at the door. One more thing. Tomorrow you'll need to decide if you want to stay here a while. I could use help with the horses, and the cooking, and pretty much everything else. I'm not good at asking for help, but I need it. I'll pay fair wages, and I'll protect you. That's a promise. Before either sister could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Lynn turned to May in the darkness. What do you think? May stroked Rusty's soft ears, feeling the dog's tail thump against the floor. I think, she said slowly, that maybe not all white men are like Tobias Cray. Maybe, Lynn agreed, but her voice carried doubt. Years of brutality weren't erased by one night of kindness. They slept fitfully, jerking awake at every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind. But each time May woke, she felt the warmth of the fire, the weight of Rusty, the presence of her sister beside her. And for the first time since the labor camp, she allowed herself to wonder if perhaps survival might mean more than just not dying. Outside, the storm finally broke. Dawn would come cold and clear, and with it decisions that would shape the rest of their lives. Morning arrived with shocking brightness. May woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's small window, turning dust motes into dancing stars. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory flooded back the storm, the stranger, the impossible rescue. Lynn was already awake, sitting upright with her back against the wall, eyes fixed on the door. Always on guard. Always the protector. May reached out and squeezed her sister's hand, receiving a brief squeeze in return. The door opened, and Ezra entered, carrying an armload of firewood. He stopped short when he saw them awake, and something like relief crossed his face. "Good morning," he said, setting the wood by the hearth. "How are you feeling?" "Warm," May answered, and realized it was true. Her fingers and toes ached with returning circulation, but the deadly cold had been driven from her bones. "Thank you." Ezra waved off the gratitude as he rebuilt the fire. "There's a basin by the table, water for washing. It's cold, I'm afraid. The well doesn't freeze, but it doesn't warm up either." He straightened, brushing bark from his hands. "I have to check on the horses. One of the mares is due to foal any day now. Make yourselves at home. There's bread in the tin on the shelf and butter in the cold box outside the back door." He was halfway to the door when a shout from outside froze him in place. "Help! Someone! Help!" Ezra was moving before the echo faded, yanking open the door and sprinting toward the barn. May and Lynn exchanged one glance before scrambling to their feet and following, still wearing Ezra's oversized clothes, their feet sliding in the two large boots. The barn was larger than May had expected, well built and sturdy. Inside, a dozen horses stood in their stalls, their breath steaming in the cold air. At the far end, Ezra knelt beside a chestnut mare lying on her side in a bed of fresh straw. The horse's flanks were heaving, her eyes rolling white with pain. "It's windy," Ezra said without looking up. "The foal's coming wrong. I can feel it, but I can't turn it. If I can't turn it, I'll lose them both." May moved forward without thinking, her father's training rising like muscle memory. 7 years of laundry hadn't erased the first 14 years of watching her father treat the sick human and animal alike. "Let me see," she said. Ezra looked up, surprise clear on his face. "You know about horses?" "No," May admitted. "But my father was physician, traditional Chinese medicine. I help him deliver many babies. Cow, pig, goat. Horse cannot be so different." For a heartbeat, Ezra hesitated. Then he moved aside. "Show me." May knelt beside the laboring mare, placing her hands on the distended belly. She closed her eyes, feeling through her palms the way her father had taught her. There. The foal was turned wrong, one leg bent back instead of extended forward. "The baby is sideways," she said. "One leg wrong position. You must reach inside, find the leg, pull it straight. But gentle, very gentle." "I tried," Ezra said, frustration thick in his voice. "I can't get the angle right." "You are too big," May observed. Your arm too thick. You push too hard, you hurt the mother." She rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms that were thin but surprisingly strong from 7 years of hauling wet laundry. "I am small. I can reach." Ezra stared at her. "You're serious." "Horse will die if we do nothing," May said simply. "Baby too. I can try. Maybe I fail. But we must try." Something shifted in Ezra's expression, respect perhaps, or recognition of a kindred stubbornness. "All right," he said. "Tell me what you need." "Hot water, soap, clean cloth." Lynn had already anticipated the need. She returned moments later with a bucket of warm water from the cabin's kettle, a bar of lye soap, and a flour sack torn into strips. May washed her hands and arms thoroughly, then nodded to Ezra. "Hold her head. Talk to her. Keep her calm." Ezra moved to Wendy's head, stroking her neck, murmuring soft reassurances. May took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to ancestors she wasn't sure were listening, and reached inside the mare. The world narrowed to touch, heat and muscle and the panicked hammering of two hearts, mother and foal. May's fingers found the bent leg, traced it up to the shoulder joint. She could feel the foal struggling, feel Wendy's contractions trying to push the baby out in the wrong position. "Gently," she whispered to herself, echoing her father's voice from a decade ago. "Feel, don't force. Work with the body, not against it." She pressed her other hand against Wendy's belly, feeling the foal's position from the outside. Then, coordinating both hands, she began to manipulate the bent leg. A little pressure here, a gentle rotation there. The foal shifted, and May felt the leg begin to straighten. Sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cold. Her arm was cramping, pushed to its limits. But the leg was moving, straightening, extending forward as it should be. Almost there. Almost. With a final careful adjustment, the leg snapped into proper position. "Now," May gasped, pulling her arm free. "Push! She can push now." Windy needed no encouragement. Her body knew what to do. 3 tremendous contractions, and the foal slid free in a rush of fluid and membrane. A colt dark bay like his mother, already struggling to breathe. Ezra was there instantly, clearing the foal's nostrils, rubbing him vigorously with straw. The colt coughed, sneezed, and drew his first shuddering breath. Then another. Then he was breathing steadily, his sides pumping like tiny bellows. Windy lifted her head, nickering softly. The colt answered with a weak whinny. Mother and son alive and well. Ezra sat back on his heels, staring at May with something approaching awe. "You saved them," he said. "Both of them. I thought for certain I'd lose them both, and you just walked in here and saved them." May felt her cheeks flush. "Is what my father teach me. He say all birth is same. Human-animal does not matter. You help the body do what it already knows. You guide, not force." "Your father taught you well," Ezra said. He stood offering her his hand. May took it and he pulled her to her feet. His grip was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked with horses and wood and leather. "You've got a healer's hands, Miss May. That's a rare gift." Lynn had been watching from the barn door, and now she stepped forward. "My sister is talented," she said, and there was pride in her voice, but also something harder. A reminder, perhaps, that May was not alone, that any gratitude was owed to both of them. Ezra seemed to understand. "Both of you are welcome here," he said, "for as long as you need. And if you're willing to work, I can pay wages, fair wages, $20 a month, split between you, room and board included." May's breath caught. $20 a month was more than they'd seen in total during 7 years at the railroad camp. "You would pay us?" she asked. Real money, Ezra confirmed. "First of every month, and it's yours to keep, no debts, no deductions. Your labor is worth fair compensation." "Why?" Lynn's question was blunt-edged with suspicion. "Why help us?" "What do you want?" Ezra met her eyes steadily. "I want help running this place," he said. "I've got 20 horses, and I'm trying to build a business selling remounts to the Army. But I can't do it alone. The barn work, the training, the books, the cooking. It's too much for one man." He paused. "And if I'm being honest, I'm tired of being alone. Not in a romantic way," he added hastily. "Just tired of the silence, of talking to horses and a dog who doesn't talk back." As if summoned, Rusty trotted into the barn and immediately went to May, pressing his head against her leg. She scratched behind his ears, and his tail wagged with enough force to stir up dust. "Traitor," Ezra said to the dog, but there was affection in it. "I feed you every day for 8 years, and she pets you once, and you're ready to switch loyalties." Despite herself, May laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Lynn shot her a warning glance, but May couldn't quite contain the smile that followed. This man, this stranger, he had a lightness to him that she hadn't encountered in 7 years. Not cruel humor at others' expense, but gentle amusement at the absurdity of life. "We will stay until spring," Lynn decided, her tone brooking no argument. "We work for you, earn money, then we decide what we do next." "Fair enough," Ezra agreed. "I'll clear out the storage alcove this afternoon. It's small, but there's room for a bed and a trunk, privacy, a door that locks from the inside." The last part was said quietly, but May understood its significance. A door that locked. Safety they controlled. After 7 years of having no control over anything, the simple promise of a lockable door felt like wealth beyond measure. "Now," Ezra said, brushing straw from his pants, "who wants to learn how to feed horses?" The next 3 hours passed in a blur of new information. Ezra showed them the feed room, explaining the different grains and their purposes. Oats for energy, bran for digestion, a little corn for weight in the winter. He demonstrated how to check hooves for stones, how to brush out tangles in mane and tail, how to approach a nervous horse without spooking it. May absorbed it all with quiet intensity, her hands gentle on the horses' velvet noses. Lynn was more hesitant, keeping her distance, until a sweet-tempered mare named Daisy pushed her nose into Lynn's palm, searching for treats. "She likes you," Ezra observed. "Daisy's picky about people. If she's chosen you, that's a compliment." Lynn stroked the mare's nose tentatively, and something in her expression softened. For just a moment she looked young. Not the hardened survivor who'd endured 7 years of brutality, but the girl she might have been in another life. They were heading back to the cabin for a late breakfast when the sound of approaching horses froze all three of them in place. Ezra's hand went immediately to the rifle leaning against the barn wall. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Both of you. Don't come out unless I call for you." "Who is it?" May whispered. "I don't know yet, but nobody just drops by out here. Not in the dead of winter." His face was grim. "Go. Now." The sisters fled to the cabin. Through the small window, May could see 3 riders approaching. Even from a distance, she recognized the lead horse. A big gray gelding with a white blaze. The same horse Tobias Cray rode when he inspected the laundry lines. "It's him," she breathed, and her hands began to shake. "Sister, it's Tobias." Lynn drew her away from the window. "He cannot see us, cannot know we are here." They heard voices outside. Tobias's voice loud and commanding. Ezra's voice quieter but firm. The conversation was too muffled to make out words, but the tone was clear. Confrontation. Minutes crawled past. May pressed her ear to the door, trying to hear. Lynn paced like a caged animal, her hands clenching and unclenching. Then suddenly, silence. The sound of horses moving away. More silence. The door opened. Ezra stepped inside, his face carved from stone. "They're looking for you," he said without preamble. "2 Chinese girls who stole a horse and ran away from Northern Pacific. There's a reward. $75 for both of you, brought back alive." May felt the blood drain from her face. $75, more money than most people in Montana Territory saw in a year. Enough to tempt anyone. "Did you tell them?" Lynn asked, her voice flat. Ezra looked at her, and something flashed in his eyes. Anger, but not at them. "I told them I hadn't seen anyone," he said. "I told them the storm was too fierce for anyone to survive outside. I told them to get off my land." "They believed you?" May asked. "No," Ezra admitted. "The deputy, Frank Stone, he's not stupid. He knows this is the only shelter for 20 miles. He'll be back, with more men, and next time he'll have a warrant to search the place." "Then we go," Lynn said immediately. "Now, before they come back." "Go where?" Ezra challenged. "The snow's 4 feet deep between here and Helena. You'd make it maybe 5 miles before you froze to death, or the search party found you." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "No, running isn't the answer. Not this time." "Then what?" May asked. "We cannot hide here forever. You said yourself they will come back." Ezra was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, the words came slowly, as if he were testing each one before committing to it. "There's a judge," he said, "Judge Samuel Brennan. He makes a circuit through this territory every 2 months, hearing cases in different towns. He's in Helena right now, about 15 miles west of here. He's a fair man, an honest man." "What good is a judge?" Lynn asked bitterly. "We are Chinese, no papers, no rights. Tobias has contract we sign. He has American law on his side." "Not if that contract is illegal," Ezra countered. "There's a law passed back in 1867, the Anti-Peonage Act. It makes it illegal to hold someone in forced labor to pay off a debt. What Tobias did to you, what he's been doing all this time, that's peonage, and it's a federal crime." Hope stirred in May's chest, tentative and fragile. "You think Judge will help us. I think Judge Brennan will at least listen," Ezra said. "And if he agrees that your contract was illegal, Tobias has no legal claim on you. But we are still immigrants without papers," Lynn pointed out. "He could report us to government, have us deported." Ezra hesitated. "There's a way around that too," he said slowly. "If you were married to an American citizen, you'd have legal protection, the right to stay, to work, to own property." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. I could marry one of you, on paper, just a legal arrangement, nothing more. It would protect you both." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. May stared at him, unable to process what he was suggesting. Lynn's face had gone very still. "You would marry a stranger," Lynn said, her voice carefully neutral. "For us." "Why, because it's the right thing to do," Ezra said simply. "Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. And because nobody deserves to be hunted like an animal for wanting to be free." He looked between the two sisters, his expression earnest. "I'm not asking for anything in return, no expectations, just a name on a piece of paper that gives you legal standing. When you're safe, when you're established, you can divorce me. I'll sign whatever papers you want, but in the meantime, you'd be protected." May's mind raced. Marriage. Even a paper marriage was an enormous step. But what choice did they have? Tobias would never stop hunting them. The law as it stood was on his side. Unless they could change their legal status, they would always be fugitives. "Which one?" she heard herself ask. "You said you could marry one of us. Which one would you choose?" Ezra looked genuinely startled by the question. "I hadn't thought that far," he admitted. "I suppose whichever one of you would be willing. It doesn't matter to me. You're both equally deserving of protection." Lynn and May turned to look at each other. 7 years of shared suffering had taught them to communicate without words, a language of glances and subtle expressions that no one else could interpret. May saw the decision forming in her sister's eyes before Lynn spoke it aloud. "I will do it," Lynn said, turning back to Ezra. "I am older. I will marry you." "Lynn, no," May protested. "You don't have to." "Someone must," Lynn said firmly. "And I am stronger. I protect you. This is just another way to protect." But May could see the truth beneath her sister's words. Lynn was sacrificing herself again, as she had always done, taking the harder path so that May wouldn't have to. And there was something else in Lynn's eyes, something sharp and watchful. She didn't trust this man despite his kindness. She was placing herself between May and potential danger, as she always had. Ezra nodded slowly. "All right then, if you're sure, Miss Lynn, we'll ride to Helena tomorrow morning, find Judge Brennan, and get this sorted out. In the meantime, I'll keep watch. If anyone comes back, we'll be ready." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I admire you both. Your courage, your strength, your loyalty to each other. Not many people would have survived what you've been through, and even fewer would have kept their humanity intact. You're remarkable women." Then he was gone, leaving the sisters alone with a decision that would change everything. Lynn turned to May, her face unreadable. "Do not look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I am sacrificing myself. I am being practical. One of us marries him, we both gain protection. It makes sense." "You do not trust him," May said softly. "I do not trust any man we have known for less than a day," Lynn corrected. "But he has done nothing to harm us yet. And until he does, we use this opportunity." She reached out, taking May's hands in hers. "We survive, sister. That is all that matters. We survive together." May squeezed her sister's hands, fighting back tears. "Always together." "Always," Lynn agreed. But as May settled down to sleep that night, wrapped in borrowed blankets in a stranger's cabin, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. Some invisible thread that had bound them together since birth was beginning to stretch to fray. Lynn was still her protector, her other half. But for the first time, May wondered if protection and love were the same thing. Outside, the Montana night was clear and cold and full of stars. Inside, 3 people lay awake, each wrestling with their own fears and hopes. Tomorrow they would ride to Helena. Tomorrow they would face a judge and plead their case. Tomorrow they would learn if American law could be made to protect the powerless or if it would always serve the strong. But tonight, in the fragile safety of Ezra Morgan's cabin, 2 sisters from Guangdong allowed themselves to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had finally found an ally worth trusting. The first small victory had been won. They had survived the storm. They had found shelter. They had earned the respect, if not yet the full trust, of a good man. Now came the harder part, fighting not just for survival, but for justice, for freedom, for the right to call this strange, brutal, beautiful country home. The battle was just beginning. The decision had been made. Come morning, they would ride to Helena, find Judge Brennan, and place their fate in the hands of American law. But first, they had to survive the night. And in Montana Territory, December 1882, survival was never guaranteed. Ezra had given the sisters his bed, insisting he was more comfortable in the barn with the horses anyway. Lynn had accepted with stiff gratitude, while May had felt a flush of shame at displacing him from his own home. But he'd waved off their protests with that easy manner of his gathering blankets and disappearing into the cold darkness before either could argue further. Now, lying in the unfamiliar bed with Lynn rigid beside her, May stared at the ceiling beams and listened to the cabin settling around them. Every creak was a potential threat. Every gust of wind against the walls could be hiding the sound of approaching horses. "You should sleep," Lynn whispered in Cantonese. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "So should you," May replied. "But neither of us will." A moment of silence. Then Lynn's hand found May's under the blankets, squeezing once before releasing. The gesture said what words could not. "I'm afraid too, but we face it together." May must have dozed eventually, because she woke to weak gray light filtering through the window and the sound of chopping wood outside. She sat up carefully, trying not to wake Lynn, and moved to the window. Ezra was at the woodpile, his breath steaming in the frigid air as the axe rose and fell with rhythmic precision. He'd been at it for a while, judging by the size of the split woodpile, working off nervous energy perhaps, or simply doing what needed to be done the way he seemed to approach everything in his life. As May watched, a movement caught her eye, a figure emerging from the tree line to the east, stumbling through the snow. A man moving erratically, as if injured. Ezra saw him too. He set down the axe and reached for the rifle leaning against the chopping block, but he didn't raise it. Just held it ready as he called out. "That's far enough, state your business." The figure kept coming, one hand raised in supplication. "Please," a voice called thick with an Irish accent. "Please, I mean no harm. I need to speak with the Chinese girls. It's urgent." May's breath caught. She knew that voice. Knew it from stolen moments in the laundry yard, from whispered warnings in the dark. She threw open the cabin door and ran out into the snow, bare feet and all. "Seamus!" The Irishman looked up, and May gasped. His face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen shut, his lips split and still bleeding. He took 2 more steps and collapsed to his knees. Ezra was there instantly, catching Seamus before he could fall face first into the snow. "Help me get him inside," he called to May. Together they half-carried, half-dragged Seamus into the cabin. Lynn was already up heating water and gathering clean cloth without being asked. Years of tending to each other's injuries in the camp had taught both sisters the basics of wound care. They settled Seamus in a chair near the fire. Up close, the damage was even worse. Someone had beaten him savagely with fists and perhaps boots. His fingers were swollen, possibly broken. Dark bruises ringed his throat. "Who did this?" Ezra demanded, his voice hard. "Tobias," Seamus gasped, "and his men. They knew I helped the girls escape. They wanted to know where I sent them." Lynn brought warm water and began cleaning the blood from Seamus's face with surprising gentleness. "You told them nothing," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I held out for 2 days," Seamus said, and there was shame in his voice. "But yesterday, when they started breaking fingers, I broke instead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I told them you'd likely gone to the only shelter within 20 miles, Morgan's ranch." "It's all right," May said, though her heart was hammering. "You came to warn us. That is what matters." "There's more," Seamus said, accepting a cup of water from Ezra. "Tobias has gone to Helena. He's getting Marshal Clayton Blackwood involved. They're coming here today, maybe this afternoon, with a legal warrant to search the property. And when they find you," his voice broke, "he's going to drag you back to that camp, or worse, Ezra's jaw tightened. How many men? Tobias the marshal, and at least 4 deputies, maybe more. And Morgan, you should know Blackwood is in Tobias's pocket. Has been for years. Whatever Tobias wants Blackwood makes legal. The cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire. 6 men at least, armed and with the law on their side, against 1 cowboy, 2 women, and a beaten Irishman. "We run," Lynn said flatly. "Now, before they arrive." "No," Ezra said, and there was steel in his voice. "Running is what they expect, what they want. You'll be easy targets out in the open, and they'll run you down within hours." He stood pacing to the window. "We need to get to Judge Brennan first. If we can get a legal ruling before Tobias arrives, his warrant won't matter." "Helena is 15 miles," Lynn pointed out. "They are already there. How do we reach the judge before they reach us?" Ezra turned back to them, and May saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not just kindness or compassion, but cold determination. The look of a man who had fought in a war and knew how to calculate odds. "I'll go to Helena alone," he said. "I'll take Thunder. He's the fastest horse I've got. I can make 15 miles in under 2 hours if I push hard. Find the judge, explain the situation, and bring him back here. And leave us alone to face Tobias if he arrives first." Lynn shook her head. "No, we all go or none go." "If we all go, we travel at the pace of the slowest rider," Ezra countered. "That's you two. No offense, but you've had 1 riding lesson. It'll take us 4, maybe 5 hours. Tobias will be here long before we make it halfway." "Then I go," Lynn said. "I am stronger rider than my sister. You stay, protect May." "Neither of you is going alone," Ezra said firmly. "This territory is dangerous even for experienced riders. For a woman alone, a Chinese woman, it's suicide. Too many men like the ones you ran from on that wagon train." They were at an impasse, each argument canceling out the last. The clock was ticking, and every minute they debated was a minute closer to Tobias's arrival. Seamus spoke up, his voice rough but determined. "I'll stay here with the girls. If Tobias comes before you return with the judge, I'll stall him. Tell him I sent them north instead of here. He might believe it, seeing as I'm in this state." "He'll kill you," Ezra said bluntly. "Maybe," Seamus agreed. "Or maybe I'll get lucky and he'll just beat me unconscious again. Either way, it buys time." He looked at May and Lynn, his battered face earnest. "I owe you, girls. I should have helped you years ago. Should have stood up to Tobias the first time he laid hands on you. I was a coward. Let me make it right." May felt tears sting her eyes. This man who had already suffered so much for them was willing to suffer more. "Seamus, no. We cannot ask this." "You're not asking," Seamus said. "I'm offering. There's a difference." Ezra studied the Irishman for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But you need to be smart about it. Don't provoke him, just delay." He turned to the sisters. "You two will hide in the root cellar under the barn. It's small and cold, but it's well concealed. Even if they search, they're unlikely to find it." "For how long?" Lynn asked. "As long as it takes," Ezra said. He moved to a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper, scribbling quickly. "This is a map to the judge's office in Helena. If I'm not back by nightfall, if something goes wrong, you take the horses and you ride. Don't wait for me. Just go." He pressed the paper into May's hand, and his fingers lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Promise me," he said quietly. "Promise me you'll save yourselves if it comes to that." May wanted to argue, wanted to insist they would wait, would help, would not abandon him. But the look in his eyes stopped her. He needed to believe they would survive, even if he didn't. It was the only way he could ride away and leave them behind. "I promise," she whispered. Ezra held her gaze a moment longer, then turned away abruptly. "I need to saddle Thunder. We're wasting time." He was gone before either sister could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. Lynn rounded on Seamus. "You should not do this. You owe us nothing." "I owe you everything," Seamus replied. "You reminded me what it means to have courage. Real courage, not the false kind you find at the bottom of a whiskey bottle." He attempted a smile, though it pulled painfully at his split lip. "Besides, I'm Irish. We're stubborn that way. Once we decide to do a thing, there's no talking us out of it." Outside they heard the sound of hoofbeats. Ezra appeared at the window, mounted on a magnificent black stallion that pranced with barely contained energy. He raised one hand in farewell, then wheeled the horse toward the west and was gone snow-flying from Thunder's hooves. The cabin felt suddenly very empty. May moved to Seamus's side, examining his hands more closely. 2 fingers on his left hand were definitely broken bent at unnatural angles. "This will hurt," she said softly, switching to English so Lynn could understand. "But I must set the bones." "Do what you need to do, lass," Seamus said, bracing himself. May worked quickly, drawing on her father's teaching. Lynn held Seamus's wrist steady, while May manipulated the broken fingers back into alignment. To his credit, Seamus only grunted, biting down on a leather strap Lynn had provided. Once the fingers were set and splinted with thin pieces of kindling and strips of cloth, May turned her attention to the bruises. She knew Chinese herbs that would help, but she had none here, only what the cabin could provide. "Ice," she said to Lynn, "from outside, and clean snow." Lynn filled a bowl with fresh snow and brought it to May, who packed it carefully around Seamus's swollen eye and the worst of the bruises on his face. It wasn't much, but it would reduce the swelling. "You have a healer's touch," Seamus observed. Ezra was right about that. "My father taught me," May said. "He said the body wants to heal. We just help it remember how." "Wise man, your father." "He sold us to pay his debts," Lynn said bitterly from across the room, "so perhaps not so wise." "He thought he was sending us to a better life," May defended. "He believed the broker's promises." "He was a fool," Lynn said flatly, "and we paid the price for his foolishness." The harshness in her sister's voice startled May. Lynn had always been the practical one, the strong one, but this bitterness was new. Or perhaps not new, just finally finding voice. Before May could respond, Rusty began barking frantically. All 3 of them froze. "The cellar," Seamus said urgently. "Now, both of you, go!" May and Lynn ran for the barn, Rusty at their heels. Inside, Ezra had shown them the concealed trapdoor near the back wall, covered with straw and a feed barrel. They moved the barrel aside, lifted the door, and dropped into the darkness below. The root cellar was exactly as Ezra had described it, small, cold, and pitch black. The earthen walls pressed close on all sides. May could hear Lynn's breathing beside her, quick and shallow. "Sister," May whispered, "are you all right?" "I do not like small spaces," Lynn admitted. "Reminds me of the coal bin." May reached out in the darkness, finding Lynn's hand and gripping it tight. "I am here. You are not alone." Above them they heard voices, male voices, loud and aggressive. Tobias Cray's voice rose above the others, shouting Seamus's name. "Well, well," Tobias's voice dripped with false cheer. "Look what crawled back. I thought you'd be halfway to Canada by now, O'Brien." "Changed my mind," Seamus replied, his voice muffled by distance and the earthened ceiling. "Figured I'd come back, face the consequences." "Noble of you," Tobias said. "Where are the girls?" "I sent them north. Told them to head for the Canadian border. They've got maybe a day's head start on you." A meaty sound like a fist hitting flesh. Seamus's grunt of pain. "Don't lie to me," Tobias snarled. "The tracks lead here. I saw them. 2 sets of footprints, small, leading from that cabin to this barn just minutes ago." In the cellar, May felt Lynn's hand tighten on hers. They'd been seen. The tracks in the snow had given them away. "Search the barn," Tobias ordered. "And if you find them, bring them to me, alive. They're worth more that way." Footsteps above, heavy boots on wooden planks, the sound of stall doors being thrown open, horses whinnying in protest, hay being kicked aside, feed barrels moved. The feed barrel directly above the trapdoor scraped across the floor. May held her breath. Beside her, Lynn had gone absolutely still. In the darkness, May could feel her sister's pulse hammering where their wrists pressed together. Light suddenly flooded the cellar as the trapdoor was yanked open. A man's face appeared in the opening, silhouetted against the brightness. Deputy Frank Stone, Tobias's right hand. "Boss," he called, "found something." But before he could reach down into the cellar, a new sound cut through the chaos. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses approaching fast. "Someone's coming," another voice called from outside. "Looks like a whole group, maybe 10 riders." Tobias cursed viciously. "Stone, leave it. We'll deal with Morgan's friends later. Get the horses ready. If this is the army, I don't want to be caught trespassing." The face disappeared from the opening. The trapdoor slammed shut, plunging the sisters back into darkness. Footsteps retreated, horses being mounted, then the thunder of hooves riding away, heading east. For a long moment, neither sister moved. Then cautiously, May reached up and pushed at the trapdoor. It opened easily, bright afternoon light spilling in. They climbed out to find the barn empty except for Ezra's horses and Rusty, who immediately rushed to Maytail, wagging furiously. They ran to the cabin. Seamus was on the floor, blood streaming from his nose, but he was conscious and attempting to sit up. "They're gone," he said, spitting blood. "Whoever just arrived scared them off." May helped him to a chair while Lynn went to the window. "I see riders," she reported. "Many riders. They are coming here." "Friends or enemies?" Seamus asked, wincing as he probed his nose. "I don't know," Lynn said, "but they are not army. No uniforms." The riders came to a stop in front of the cabin. May counted 12 of them, men and women, both bundled against the cold. At their head rode a man of perhaps 60 years, gray-bearded and stern-faced, sitting his horse with military precision. He dismounted and approached the cabin door, knocking firmly. "This is Judge Samuel Brennan, Territorial Court. I'm looking for Ezra Morgan and 2 Chinese women who may be in need of legal assistance." The sisters shared a knowing look. The judge. Ezra had somehow found him and brought him here, along with what looked like half the town of Helena. Lynn opened the door. "We are the Chen sisters," she said carefully. "May and Lin Chen. You are looking for us." Judge Brennan's stern expression softened slightly. "I am. Mr. Morgan rode into Helena an hour ago with a rather extraordinary story about peonage, illegal labor contracts, and 2 women in desperate need of legal protection. He asked me to come immediately. I brought witnesses." He gestured to the riders behind him. "Citizens of Helena who are willing to testify to your character and your situation." An older woman dismounted, her face kind despite its weathered lines. "I'm Ada Whitmore," she said. "I run the boarding house in Helena. Ezra told me your story. If there's any way I can help, I will." A man with a medical bag followed her. "Doc Harrison, Ezra said you might have injuries that need tending." One by one the riders introduced themselves. A shopkeeper, a minister, a rancher, a school teacher. People who had no reason to help 2 Chinese strangers, yet here they were, riding 15 miles through the snow because Ezra Morgan had asked them to. "Where is Mr. Morgan?" May asked, her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "He's gathering evidence," Judge Brennan said. "Riding to the Northern Pacific camp to speak with other workers who might testify about Tobias Cray's treatment of laborers. He said to tell you he'd be back by nightfall." The judge paused. "He also said to tell you, and I quote, that stubborn cowboy women should trust stubborn cowboys to do their jobs." Despite everything, May felt a smile tug at her lips. That sounded like Ezra. "Now then," Judge Brennan said briskly, "shall we discuss the legal particulars of your situation? I understand there's a marriage proposal on the table as well. Highly irregular, but then these are irregular times." As the judge and the Helena citizens filed into the cabin, as Doc Harrison examined Seamus's injuries and Mrs. Whitmore began preparing food from Ezra's stores, May felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of survival, but real hope. Hope that perhaps the law could be made to serve justice. Hope that good people still existed in this harsh country. Hope that she and Lynn might actually build a life here, free from fear. Outside, the winter sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks. Somewhere out there, Ezra was riding hard, gathering allies and evidence. And here in his cabin, surrounded by strangers who were choosing to be friends, two sisters from Guangdong prepared to fight not with fists or flight, but with the one weapon Tobias Cray had never expected them to wield, the truth. The hard journey had begun. But they were no longer alone. Judge Brennan proved to be a man of remarkable efficiency. Within an hour of his arrival, he had transformed Ezra's small cabin into an impromptu courtroom with witnesses seated along the walls and the judge himself at the kitchen table, which now served as his bench. "Miss May," he began, his voice formal but not unkind. "I need to hear your story from the beginning. Everything. Leave nothing out, even if you think it might make you look bad. The truth, however uncomfortable, is our strongest weapon." And so they told it, all of it. The promises made in Guangdong, the reality of the labor camp, the debt that only grew larger over the years. Tobias's hands. Lynn's punishment in the coal bin, the escape, the wagon train, the men who planned to sell them. Judge Brennan took notes in a small leather book, his face growing progressively darker. When May described the contract they'd been forced to sign, a document in English they couldn't read, he set down his pen with such force it left an ink blot on the page. "Unconscionable," he muttered. "Absolutely unconscionable." "Is it illegal?" Lynn asked. "Or just unconscionable?" "Both," the judge said firmly. "The Anti-Peonage Act of 1867 makes it a federal crime to hold someone in forced labor to satisfy a debt. What Tobias Cray has done is not only morally repugnant, it's a violation of federal law." He looked up at the sisters. "But here's the problem. You're undocumented immigrants. While the peonage charge will invalidate your contract with Northern Pacific, it doesn't automatically grant you legal residency." "What does that mean?" May asked, though she suspected she already knew. "It means that even if we free you from Tobias Cray, the federal government could still deport you back to China." Judge Brennan sighed. "I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. Unless," Mrs. Whitmore interjected from her seat by the fire, "unless they have legal grounds to stay, such as marriage to an American citizen." Judge Brennan nodded slowly. "That is indeed one path. Mr. Morgan mentioned he'd made such an offer. Is that still on the table?" "I have agreed," Lynn said. "I will marry Mr. Morgan, for legal protection, nothing more." Something flickered across May's face. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. But she said nothing. "Very well," the judge said. "I can perform the ceremony here and now if you wish. It would give you immediate legal standing. But I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Marriage, even a marriage of convenience, is a legally binding contract. It carries rights and responsibilities on both sides." "What kind of responsibilities?" Lynn asked warily. "Financial obligations, property rights. If Mr. Morgan were to die, you would inherit his estate. If you were to have children, they would be his legal heirs." The judge paused. "And dissolving the marriage later would require a legal divorce, which can be complicated and expensive." "We understand," Lynn said. "When can we do this ceremony?" "As soon as Mr. Morgan returns," Judge Brennan replied. "I'll need both parties present plus 2 witnesses." The door burst open, admitting a gust of frigid air and a snow-covered Ezra Morgan. He was breathing hard, his face flushed from the cold and the ride. Behind him stood a handful of rough-looking men, Chinese laborers by their dress and features. "Judge," Ezra said without preamble, "I brought witnesses, workers from the Northern Pacific camp. They're willing to testify about Tobias Cray's practices." Over the next hour, the cabin heard stories that made May's and Lynn's suffering seem almost mild by comparison. Tales of men beaten for working too slowly, of wages withheld indefinitely, of workers who tried to leave and were hunted down by Tobias's men, of at least 3 Chinese laborers who had simply disappeared over the years, their fate unknown but suspected. One man, ancient and wizened, spoke in halting English about his own contract. "I come to America 30 years ago, help build railroad. They promise 5 years' work, then freedom. I worked 30 years, still not free. They say I owe money for food, for shelter, for tools. Debt never end. Judge Brennan's hand trembled slightly as he wrote. When the testimony was finished, he looked at Ezra with something approaching awe. Mr. Morgan, do you understand what you've done here? You've just handed me evidence of a systematic labor trafficking operation. This isn't just about 2 women. This is about dozens, maybe hundreds of workers held in illegal bondage. I understand, Ezra said quietly, and I'll testify to whatever you need. But right now my priority is protecting Miss May and Miss Lynn from Tobias Cray. Everything else can come later. Agreed, the judge said. Speaking of which, I understand there's to be a wedding. Ezra's eyes found Lynn across the crowded cabin. If Miss Lynn is still willing. I am? Lynn said, standing. Her face was composed, unreadable. Then let's proceed, Judge Brennan said. Mr. Morgan, Miss Lynn, please stand before me. They did Ezra tall and solid in his work clothes, Lynn small but straight-backed in her borrowed dress. They made an odd pair, this frontier cowboy and the Chinese refugee. But then May thought perhaps all marriages were odd when viewed from the outside. Do you, Ezra Morgan, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife to have and to hold for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Ezra said, his voice steady. And do you, Lin Chen, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband under the same terms? Lin hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Her eyes found May's across the room. Something passed between the sisters, some wordless communication. Then Lin turned back to the judge. I do. By the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Judge Brennan closed his book. You may, if you wish, seal this union with a kiss. That won't be necessary, Lynn said quickly. Ezra nodded. Agreed. They shook hands instead, a brief businesslike gesture that somehow made the whole proceeding feel more honest. This was a legal arrangement, nothing more. A practical solution to an impossible problem. The witnesses clapped politely. Mrs. Whitmore produced a cake she'd apparently baked that afternoon in Ezra's oven. Someone opened a bottle of whiskey. The atmosphere shifted from courtroom solemnity to something approaching celebration. Only May stood apart, unable to join in the festivity. She should be happy. Her sister was now legally protected. They both were, as Lynn's dependent. The threat of deportation had been neutralized. They were safe. So why did her chest feel tight? Why did watching Ezra and Lynn standing side by side, married in the eyes of the law, make her want to flee into the snow? You all right, lass? Seamus materialized at her elbow, his battered face concerned. I am fine, May lied. You're a terrible liar, Seamus observed, but that's a good thing. The world has enough good liars already. He followed her gaze to where Ezra was speaking with Judge Brennan Lynn at his side. Complicated situation. It is practical, May said. Smart, the right decision. The right decision and the easy decision are rarely the same thing, Seamus said. Take it from a man who spent 20 years making the easy choice and has the scars to prove it. Before May could respond, the door burst open again. This time it was a young boy no more than 12, gasping for breath. Judge Brennan, he panted. My pa sent me. Tobias Cray is in Helena. He's at the marshal's office with a whole gang of men. They're getting a warrant to search this place, and Marshal Blackwood is with them. The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned to Judge Brennan. How many men? The judge asked calmly. I counted 8, sir, plus the marshal makes 9. Ezra moved to the window, his hand automatically going to the rifle, leaning against the wall. They'll be here within the hour, maybe less if they ride hard. Let them come, Judge Brennan said. I've just performed a legal marriage. Mrs. Lynn Morgan is now an American citizen's wife. Tobias Cray has no legal claim on her. What about me? May asked quietly. The judge hesitated. You're Lynn's sister. As long as you reside with her and her husband, you have some legal protection, but it's not as ironclad as marriage would provide. Then, perhaps, Reverend Webb spoke up, the minister from Helena, who'd ridden out with the judge. Perhaps a second marriage is in order. All eyes turned to May. She felt her cheeks flush. "I cannot," she said. "Mr. Morgan is married to my sister. He cannot marry me as well." "Not Mr. Morgan," Reverend Webb said gently, "but there are other good men here. Mr. Seamus O'Brien, for instance. He's unmarried, I believe." Seamus nearly choked on his whiskey. "Reverend, I'm Irish Catholic, and she's Chinese. I'm 45 years old, and she's, 25? And I've known her all of 3 hours. I don't think that's wise." "Wisdom," the Reverend said, "is knowing when the rules must bend. Would you rather see this young woman dragged back to slavery because we stood on ceremony?" Seamus looked at May, his battered face uncertain. "I'd be honored, lass, if you're willing. But only if you're willing. I'll not force protection on you that you don't want." May's mind raced. Another marriage of convenience, another legal shield. But unlike Lynn and Ezra, she barely knew Seamus. He'd been kind to them at the camp, yes. He'd helped them escape. But to bind herself to him legally, even in name only, "There's another option," Ezra said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "I own this ranch. 500 acres, free and clear. I could deed half of it to Miss May. Property ownership would give her legal standing at least until we can sort out proper immigration papers." "That's generous," Judge Brennan said slowly, "but property ownership alone won't protect her from a deportation order. Marriage would." The cabin erupted in discussion, everyone offering opinions and advice. May felt overwhelmed, drowning in voices and options and decisions that would shape her entire future. "Stop!" Lynn's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone fell silent. "Stop talking about my sister as if she is not here. Ask her what she wants." All eyes turned to May. She looked around the cabin at these people, most of whom she'd met only hours ago, all of whom were trying to help. Good people. Truly good people. Her gaze landed on Ezra. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, certainly. But something else, too. Something that made her heart beat faster. "I want," May said slowly, "to not decide my whole life in one afternoon. Can we not wait? See what Tobias does when he arrives. Judge Brennan says I have some protection as Lynn's sister. Perhaps that will be enough. And if it's not, Mrs." Whitmore asked gently. "Then I will decide," May said. "But I will decide for myself, not have others decide for me." Judge Brennan nodded approvingly. "Fair enough. We'll take this one step at a time. For now, let's prepare for Tobias Cray's arrival. Mr. Morgan, I assume you have somewhere secure where Miss May could hide if necessary." "The root cellar," Ezra said. "Under the barn. It's where they hid earlier." "No," May said firmly. "No more hiding. If Tobias comes, I will face him. With truth. With witnesses. With law. But I will not cower in a hole in the ground." Lynn looked at her sister with surprise and something that might have been pride. "When did you become so brave?" "When I had no other choice," May replied. The truth was, she didn't feel brave. She felt terrified. But years of being invisible, of keeping her head down and her voice quiet, had achieved nothing but more suffering. Perhaps it was time to try a different approach. The afternoon wore on. The Helena citizens prepared the cabin for what might come. Doc Harrison checked Seamus's injuries and pronounced him likely to live, though his nose would never be quite straight again. Mrs. Whitmore and some of the other women prepared a large pot of stew, reasoning that whatever happened, people would need feeding. Ezra showed several of the men his stock of weapons. Not much, just 3 rifles and 2 pistols, but enough to make a show of force if necessary. Judge Brennan counseled against violence if it could be avoided. "We have the law on our side," he insisted. "Let's use it before we resort to guns." As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink, the lookout posted on the road shouted a warning. "Riders coming, 9 of them." Everyone moved into position. Judge Brennan and Reverend Webb stood on the cabin's small porch, their presence a statement of moral authority. Ezra and several armed men flanked them. The women and older men stayed inside but near the windows. May stood with Lynn, their hands clasped tight. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The riders came into view. Tobias Cray rode at their head, that familiar scar visible even at a distance. Beside him rode a man wearing a marshal's star, his face hard and weathered. Behind them, 6 deputies, all armed. They stopped 30 yards from the cabin, their horses stamping and snorting in the cold. "Well now," Tobias called out, his voice carrying across the snow. "Looks like Morgan's got himself some friends. That's nice. Real neighborly." "Mr. Cray," Judge Brennan said formally, "I'm Judge Samuel Brennan of the Territorial Court. I understand you have business here." "I do," Tobias said. "I'm here to collect my property, 2 Chinese girls who ran away from their legal work obligations. I have a warrant from Marshal Blackwood to search these premises." "Your warrant is irrelevant," Judge Brennan said. "The young women you're seeking are no longer under any legal obligation to Northern Pacific Railroad. Their contract has been voided under the Anti-Peonage Act of 1867. Tobias's face darkened. "That's not your call to make, Judge. You're not a federal court." "No, but I am an officer of the Territorial Court, and I have authority to rule on matters of territorial law. Peonage is illegal. Your contract is void." Judge Brennan pulled out a document. Furthermore, one of the women in question, Lynn Chen, is now Lynn Morgan, legally married to Mr. Ezra Morgan. She is entitled to all the rights and protections afforded to the wife of an American citizen. Marshal Blackwood spoke up. "That's a mighty convenient marriage, Judge, almost like it was arranged just to thwart the law." "The law is what gives her the right to marry," Judge Brennan countered. "Whether it's convenient or not is irrelevant. It's legal." "What about the other one?" Tobias demanded. "May Chen. She's not married. She's still mine." "She's no one's property," Ezra said, his voice dangerous. "Not yours, not anyone's." "She owes me $600, Tobias snarled. "I want my money, or I want her back to work off the debt." "There is no debt," Judge Brennan said. "An illegal contract creates no legal obligation. You have no claim on her, financial or otherwise." Tobias's hand moved toward his gun. Immediately, every armed man on the porch raised their rifles. The deputies behind Tobias did the same. For a terrible moment, violence hung in the air like a drawn breath. Then May stepped out of the cabin. "Stop," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but something in it made everyone pause. "Please, no shooting. No one needs to die." She walked down the porch steps past the judge and Ezra toward Tobias. Lynn tried to follow, but May held up a hand. "I need to do this," she said softly. She stopped 10 feet from Tobias's horse, looking up at the man who had terrorized her for 7 years. "You say I owe you money," she said. $600 for passage from China. But you lie. The broker in Guangdong, he was paid by my father. $100. We owe Northern Pacific nothing." "You calling me a liar?" Tobias's face was purple with rage. "I am calling you thief," May said, and her voice was steady. "You steal wages. You steal freedom. You steal 7 years of my life and my sister's life. You beat us. You lock us in coal bin. You touch us when we say no." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the scars she'd shown in the cabin earlier, scars from Tobias's belt. "The only debt is the one you owe us." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Several of the Helena citizens looked shocked. Even some of Tobias's own men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Tobias raised his hand to strike her. Ezra was moving before the blow could fall, but he needn't have bothered. May caught Tobias's wrist with surprising strength, holding it immobile. "You have no power over me anymore," she said quietly. "You have no legal claim. You have no moral right. You have nothing but your anger and your greed, and those are not enough." She released his wrist and stepped back. Tobias stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The mousy, frightened girl from the laundry yard had vanished. In her place stood a woman who had found her voice. "This is insane," Marshal Blackwood said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Cray, maybe we should—" "No," Tobias growled. "I'm not leaving here without what's mine." "Then you're leaving here with nothing," Judge Brennan said. "Marshal Blackwood, I'm formally ordering you to stand down. If you persist in this unlawful search, I'll have you brought up on charges of harassment and abuse of authority." Blackwood looked between the judge and Tobias, clearly calculating. Finally, he turned his horse. "I'm done here, Cray. This is your fight now, not mine." He rode away, taking 4 of the 6 deputies with him. That left Tobias and 2 men against a dozen armed citizens and 1 very determined judge. Tobias seemed to deflate slightly, the bluster leaking out of him. "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded more like hope than threat. "Yes," May said, "it is." She turned her back on him, a gesture of dismissal, more final than any words, and walked back to the cabin. Past Ezra, who was staring at her with undisguised admiration, past Judge Brennan, who gave her an approving nod, into the cabin where Lynn waited. Outside, Tobias Cray wheeled his horse and rode away, his 2 remaining men following. The siege was over, won not with guns, but with courage and truth. The cabin erupted in cheers. People embraced, laughed, cried with relief. But May felt only exhaustion. She sank into a chair, her legs finally giving out now that the danger had passed. Lynn knelt beside her. "That was very brave, and very stupid." "Probably," May agreed. "But also necessary," Lynn added. "I see now. You are not the little sister I must always protect. You have grown strong." May looked at her sister, really looked at her. Lynn's eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. A real smile, not the tight, controlled expression she'd worn for years. "We both grew strong," May said. "Together." Ezra approached hesitant. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said softly. "You could have been killed." "But I was not," May pointed out. "And now he knows. We are not afraid anymore." Ezra crouched down so they were at eye level. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Both of you. When I offered to marry Lynn, I meant it as practical protection. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Not because I fell in love," he added quickly, "but because I came to care. About both of you. About your safety, your future. You've become important to me." "You are important to us too," May said, and knew it was true. "Which is why," Ezra continued, "I think we should amend our agreement. Lynn, you married me for protection. That protection is yours for as long as you need it. But if you want to end the marriage, if you want to build a different life, I'll sign divorce papers tomorrow, no questions asked." Lynn studied him for a long moment. "And what about my sister? What about her? She needs protection too. More than I do, perhaps, since I now have your name. What happens to May?" Ezra looked at May, and something passed between them, something warm and uncertain and full of possibility. "I'll deed half the ranch to her," he said, "like I offered before. That gives her property rights, legal standing. And Judge Brennan says he'll help with proper immigration papers. It might take time, but we'll get it done." "Thank you," May whispered. The celebration continued around them. But in that small corner of the cabin, 3 people sat in quiet understanding. They had survived the day. They had won at least for now. But everyone could sense that the real battles, the internal ones, were just beginning. Lynn was married to a man she didn't love, protecting a sister who might need different protection. Ezra had bound himself legally to one woman while his eyes followed another. And May stood at the center of it all, caught between gratitude and something more complicated, something that made her heart race when Ezra smiled at her. The hard journey had brought them allies, had brought them strength, had brought them this far. But the hardest journey of all, the journey of the heart, was still ahead. 3 months had passed since that frozen December day when Tobias Cray rode away defeated. 3 months of relative peace, of learning to live without looking over their shoulders, of discovering what freedom actually felt like. But peace May was learning was not the same as resolution. It was mid-March now, 1883. The snow had begun its slow retreat from the Montana valleys, leaving behind mud and the first brave shoots of spring grass. The ranch had survived the winter. More than survived, it had grown. Word of Ezra Morgan's stand against Tobias Cray had spread through the territory, and suddenly everyone wanted to buy horses from the cowboy who'd sheltered Chinese refugees and faced down corrupt railroad bosses. May stood in the barn, her hands gentle on the flanks of a mare in labor. This would be the fourth foal she'd helped deliver this spring. Ezra had taken to calling her his horse whisperer, claiming the animals trusted her in ways they trusted no one else. "How's Stella doing?" Ezra's voice came from the barn door. Even after 3 months, the sound of it still made May's pulse quicken in a way she tried hard to ignore. "The foal is positioned well," May reported, keeping her voice professional. "Another hour, I think." Ezra moved to stand beside her, and May was acutely aware of the warmth of his body in the cool barn. They worked in silence for a moment, both checking the mare's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Lynn's gone to Helena again," Ezra said finally. "Third time this week." May nodded. She knew. Lynn had been spending more and more time in town helping Mrs. Whitmore at the boarding house, learning the business side of running an establishment. Building a life that didn't revolve around the ranch. Building a life that didn't include Ezra. "She is finding her own path," May said softly. "This is good thing." "Is it?" Ezra asked. "Because sometimes I wonder if she's just running from something. From me. From this arrangement we made." May turned to look at him. In the dim barn light, his face was shadowed, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Concern and something else. Guilt, perhaps. "You gave her freedom," May said. "Real freedom, not just legal papers. She is grateful. We both are." "Gratitude isn't what I wanted," Ezra said, then stopped himself. "That came out wrong. I just mean I don't want either of you to feel trapped here, by obligation or gratitude or anything else." Before May could respond, the mare shifted, a low groan escaping her. The foal was coming. May and Ezra moved in synchronized precision, guiding the birth with gentle hands and soft words. 20 minutes later, a healthy colt lay in the straw, already trying to stand on spindly legs. "Another successful delivery," Ezra said, grinning. "You really do have magic hands." May felt herself flush. Not magic, just practice. "May." Ezra's voice had gone serious. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. Was she happy? She had a warm place to sleep, enough food to eat, work that gave her purpose. She was no longer a slave, no longer hunted. She had her sister, her freedom, and friends who cared about her well-being. By any objective measure, she should be deliriously happy. "I am content," she said carefully. "Content," Ezra repeated. "That's not the same as happy." "Is it not?" "No." He moved closer, and May's breathing stopped. "Happy is waking up excited about the day. Happy is laughing until your sides hurt. Happy is feeling like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with exactly who you're supposed to be with." May's heart was hammering. "And you? Are you happy?" Ezra was quiet for a long moment. "I'm married to your sister," he said finally. "A good woman who deserves better than a paper marriage to a man who can't give her what she needs. And I spend every day trying not to feel things I have no right to feel. So no May." "I'm not happy. I'm grateful to have you both here. I'm proud of what we've built." "But happy?" He shook his head. "That's complicated." Before May could respond, the barn door burst open. Lynn stood there, her face flushed from riding her eyes bright with news. "Judge Brennan is back," she announced. "He is at the cabin. He says he has news about Tobias. Important news." The three of them hurried to the cabin, where they found Judge Brennan seated at the table, a thick folder of papers spread before him. He looked tired, but satisfied. "Ah, good," he said as they entered. "I wanted all of you to hear this together. Mrs. Morgan, Mr. Morgan, Miss Chen." He gestured to the chairs. "Please sit." They sat, May acutely aware that Ezra had positioned himself between her and Lynn, as if physically embodying the awkwardness of their situation. I've spent the last 3 months building a case against Tobias Cray and Northern Pacific Railroad, Judge Brennan began. With the testimony you provided plus statements from 17 other workers, I had enough evidence to bring charges in federal court. And, Ezra prompted, and 2 days ago a federal judge in Denver found Tobias Cray guilty of multiple counts of peonage, labor trafficking, and fraud. He's been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Northern Pacific has been fined $5,000 and ordered to pay restitution to every worker who can prove they were held in illegal bondage. May felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. 15 years. Tobias Cray would be an old man when he got out, assuming he survived prison at all. "Is he in jail now?" Lynn asked, her voice carefully controlled. "He's being held in the territorial prison in Deer Lodge, awaiting transfer to a federal facility. He won't be bothering you again." Judge Brennan smiled. "You're safe, truly safe." May waited for the relief to come, for the weight she'd carried for 7 years to lift. But instead she felt oddly hollow. Tobias Cray had loomed so large in her life for so long that his absence left a void she didn't know how to fill. "What about the other workers?" Ezra asked. "The ones still at the camp. Northern Pacific is being forced to release all Chinese laborers from their contracts and provide them with back wages. The camp is being shut down." Judge Brennan pulled out another document. "Which brings me to my second piece of news. Mrs. Whitmore has offered to house the displaced workers at her boarding house until they can find new employment. She's asked if either of you might be willing to help coordinate their placement. You understand what they've been through better than anyone." The sisters' eyes met briefly. Lynn spoke first. "I will help," she said. "I am already spending time at Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house. This is logical extension of that work." "Excellent," Judge Brennan said. "Miss May, what about you?" "I will help too," May said. "However I can." "Good. Now there's one final matter." Judge Brennan pulled out a legal document. "Mr. Morgan, you mentioned wanting to deed part of your property to Miss May. I've drawn up the papers. 500 acres transferred to May Chen free and clear. No obligations, no strings attached. If you're still willing to sign, that is." Ezra didn't hesitate. "Where do I sign?" 10 minutes later, May Chen was a landowner. 500 acres of Montana territory belonged to her. The realization was so overwhelming she had to sit down. "This is real," she whispered. "I own this land." "You own it," Judge Brennan confirmed. "You can sell it, lease it, build on it, farm it. It's yours to do with as you wish." May looked at Ezra. Why give me this?" "Because you've earned it," Ezra said simply. "You've worked this ranch as hard as I have these past 3 months. You've helped birth half the foals, treated sick horses, even helped break that stubborn gelding to saddle. The land should belong to someone who loves it. And you do. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at these mountains." Tears stung May's eyes. "I do not know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Ezra said quietly. "Say you'll build something here, whatever that something is, wherever it leads. Just say you'll stay." The weight of his gaze was almost unbearable. May looked at Lynn, seeking guidance, but her sister's expression was unreadable. "I will stay," May said finally. "For now, this is home." Judge Brennan gathered his papers, clearly sensing the undercurrents in the room. "Well, I'll leave you to discuss the details. Mrs. Morgan, if you could stop by the boarding house tomorrow. Mrs. Whitmore would like to go over the plans for housing the displaced workers." "I will be there," Lynn promised. After the judge left, an awkward silence settled over the cabin. Finally, Lynn stood. "I am going to check on the horses," she announced, though everyone knew the horses were fine. She left before anyone could object. Alone with Ezra, May felt the tension in the room ratchet up several notches. She busied herself making tea, needing something to do with her hands. "May," Ezra said, "we need to talk about this, about us." "There is no us," May said quickly. "You are married to my sister. A marriage in name only. You know that. Lynn knows that." "Hell, the whole territory knows that." Ezra rubbed his temples in frustration. "We've been dancing around this for 3 months, pretending we don't feel what we feel. It's driving me crazy." "What do you want me to say?" May asked, her voice rising. "That I have feelings for you, that sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about you, that it tears me apart to watch you with my sister, even though I know the marriage is meaningless." She was breathing hard now, years of repressed emotion pouring out. "Yes, I feel these things, but it does not matter. You are my sister's husband. I will not betray her that way." "What if she wants out?" Ezra asked. "What if Lynn wants to end this marriage and move on with her life? Then you will be divorced cowboy," May said, "and I will be woman who stole her sister's husband. Do you think I want to live with that? Do you think Lynn would forgive me?" "I think," Ezra said carefully, "that Lynn is smarter than we give her credit for. I think she knows exactly what's happening here. And I think she's been pulling away on purpose, creating space for something new to grow." May wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But the weight of years of depending on Lynn, sacrificing everything to protect her, was too heavy to simply set aside. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think, to figure out who I am separate from my sister. I have been half of May and Lynn for my whole life. I do not know how to be just May." "Then take the time," Ezra said. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither is this." He gestured between them. "Whatever this is, it's real, and it'll still be here when you're ready to face it." He left, then giving her the space she'd asked for. May sank into a chair, head in her hands. Freedom, she was learning, was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. When you were a slave, your path was clear because you had no choices. But freedom meant choosing what to do, where to go, who to love. And sometimes the hardest choice was allowing yourself to want something you thought you had no right to want. Outside, spring continued its inexorable march. The land was waking up, shedding winter's death grip and reaching for the sun. Change was in the air, inevitable and terrifying and necessary. And May Chen, landowner, former slave survivor of more than most people endured in a lifetime, had to figure out what she wanted her freedom to mean. The answer, she suspected, would require more courage than anything she'd faced so far. Summer arrived in Montana with the subtlety of a brass band. One day it was spring cool mornings and muddy afternoons. The next, the sun blazed overhead with enough intensity to make even the hardiest cowboy seek shade during midday. It had been 3 months since Judge Brennan's visit. 3 months of careful distance between May and Ezra of Lynn, spending more time in Helena than at the ranch of everyone pretending the elephant in the room wasn't there. The displaced workers from the Northern Pacific camp had been successfully relocated. Some had found work on other ranches. Some had opened small businesses in Helena. A few had moved on to California, chasing the promise of better opportunities. But 7 of them had chosen to stay at Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house, working odd jobs and slowly rebuilding lives shattered by years of bondage. Lynn had become their unofficial advocate. She helped them navigate the complexities of American bureaucracy, translated documents, negotiated fair wages with potential employers. She'd discovered a talent for organization and business that had lain dormant during her years at the labor camp. "Your sister is remarkable," Mrs. Whitmore told May one afternoon as they sat on the boarding house porch watching Lynn help an elderly Chinese man fill out a bank account application. "She has a gift for this kind of work, making order from chaos, helping people find their footing." "She has always been the strong one," May said. "Strong, yes, but also lonely, I think." Mrs. Whitmore's sharp eyes studied May. "She carries a heavy burden, not just responsibility for others, but responsibility for her own happiness, or lack thereof." May shifted uncomfortably. "I do not know what you mean." "Don't you—" Mrs. Whitmore smiled gently. "Child, I've been alive 60 years. I've seen every kind of human drama there is. I know a marriage of convenience when I see one, and I know what it looks like when 2 people are in love but think they shouldn't be." May felt her cheeks burn. "Mrs. Whitmore, I cannot discuss this." "Can't or won't?" The older woman patted May's hand. "I'm not trying to pry, dear. I'm just saying that sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is let them off the hook. Let them admit that the sacrifice they made doesn't have to be permanent. Before May could respond, Lin called from inside. May, can you help Mr. Chen with his English? He is struggling with the bank form. May excused herself gratefully, fleeing into the cool interior of the boarding house. But Mrs. Whitmore's words stayed with her, circling in her mind like birds looking for a place to land. That evening, as May prepared to ride back to the ranch, Lin stopped her. "Sister, can we talk privately?" They walked to the small garden behind the boarding house where Mrs. Whitmore grew vegetables and herbs. In the fading golden light, Lin looked younger than her 25 years, or perhaps just less burdened. "I have made a decision," Lin said without preamble. "I am going to ask Ezra for a divorce." May's heart seemed to stop. Why? "Because this arrangement we made, it was necessary at the time, but it is not necessary anymore." Lin plucked a leaf from a tomato plant, rolling it between her fingers. "Judge Brennan says I can keep my legal status even after divorce. I have been here more than 6 months. I have established residency. I have work. I do not need to be married to remain in America." "Lin, you do not have to do this for me," May said quickly. Lin looked at her sister, really looked at her. "You think I am doing this for you. Are you not? Oh, May." Lin's laugh was soft and sad. "I am doing this for me. For the first time in my life, I am doing something purely for myself." She took May's hands. "Do you know what I have discovered these past months? I like being independent. I like making my own money, my own decisions. I like going to bed alone and waking up alone and not having to consider anyone else's needs before my own." "But Ezra has been good to you," May protested. "He has been perfect," Lin agreed. "Kind and respectful, and exactly what I needed when I needed it. But May, I do not love him, and he does not love me. We are friends who made a legal arrangement. That is all we have ever been." May's throat felt tight. "What if I am not ready? What if I do not know what I want?" "Then you take your time and figure it out," Lin said firmly. "My divorce from Ezra is not about you and Ezra. It is about me finding my own path. If you and Ezra happen to find your way to each other eventually, that is your business. If you do not, that is also your business. I am not the obstacle you think I am." "You have always protected me," May whispered, "always sacrificed for me." "And that is exactly the problem." Lin's voice was gentle but firm. "I made you my purpose, my reason for everything. But that is not healthy, May. Not for you and not for me. You are not my child. You are my sister, my twin, my other half. But you are also your own person. And I need to be my own person too." May felt tears streaming down her face. "I am afraid. What if we lose each other?" "We will never lose each other," Lin said, pulling May into a fierce embrace. "We are twins. 2 halves of one soul, remember." But Father also said something else before we left China. He said, "You go together so you may hold each other up, but one day you must learn to stand alone. I think that day has come." They held each other for a long time, 2 sisters who had survived everything life had thrown at them, now facing the hardest challenge of all. Growing up, growing apart, growing into themselves. "When will you tell Ezra?" May asked finally. "Tomorrow," Lin said. "I will ride out to the ranch in the morning. It is time." That night May barely slept. She lay in the small room Lin had rented above the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine a future where Lin was not married to Ezra, where the path between May and Ezra was clear, and found that even with the obstacle removed, she was still terrified. The next morning dawned bright and hot. May rode back to the ranch alone, Lin having left earlier, on a borrowed horse. As May approached, she could see 2 figures standing near the barn, Ezra and Lin talking. May stayed back, giving them privacy. From a distance, she watched Ezra's body language change from surprise to understanding to something that looked like relief. She saw him embrace Lin, a brief, friendly hug. Saw Lin hand him papers, saw him sign them without hesitation. Then Lin was mounting her horse and riding away. and Ezra was standing alone watching her go. May approached slowly. Ezra turned at the sound of her horse's hooves. "She told you," May said. "It wasn't a question." "She did." Ezra held up the papers. "Divorce petition. We'll file it with Judge Brennan next week. 6 months from now, the marriage will be legally dissolved." "How do you feel?" Ezra considered the question. "Relieved mostly, and grateful to Lynn for being brave enough to do what I couldn't quite bring myself to suggest. She's a remarkable woman." "She is," May agreed. She dismounted suddenly, needing solid ground beneath her feet. "Ezra, I need to tell you something." "All right." "I am terrified," May said in a rush. "I have feelings for you, yes, strong feelings. But I do not know if they are real, or if they are just gratitude and proximity, and the fact that you were kind to me when everyone else was cruel. I do not trust my own heart because I have never had the freedom to listen to it before." Ezra nodded slowly. "That's fair. And even if my feelings are real, I do not know if I am ready for anything more than friendship. I have never been alone, never been just May without Lynn to define myself against. I need time to figure out who I am." "Also fair," Ezra said. "May, I'm not going anywhere. I care about you. A lot. More than a lot. But I don't need an answer today or next week or even next year. Take all the time you need." "What if I need forever?" May asked, only half joking. "Then I guess I'll wait forever," Ezra said. "I'm a patient man, comes from working with horses. They can't be rushed into trust. It has to be earned day by day, moment by moment." Despite herself, May smiled. "You are comparing me to a horse only in the best possible way," Ezra said, grinning. "Horses are noble creatures, smart, loyal, beautiful. It's a compliment." "You are a very strange man," May said. "So I've been told." They stood there in the Montana sunshine, not quite lovers, not quite friends, but something in between, something new and uncertain and full of possibility. "I should check on the horses," May said finally. "Need help. Always." They worked side by side through the heat of the day, their conversation light and easy, carefully avoiding the heavy topics that hung between them. But there was a new quality to their interactions now, a sense of doors opening rather than closing, of futures that might be possible rather than futures foreclosed. 6 months passed. December 1883, a year since that frozen night when Ezra had found 2 desperate women in the snow and changed all their lives forever. The ranch had grown. Ezra now employed 3 full-time hands, all Chinese men who'd been freed from the northern Pacific camp. The horse operation had expanded to 50 animals with a reputation that stretched all the way to the Army posts in Wyoming. May had opened a small clinic in a converted storage room, treating both people and animals with a combination of Chinese medicine and the Western techniques Doc Harrison had taught her. Her patient list included farmers, ranchers, miners, and even a few of the more open-minded townspeople from Helena. Lynn had officially become Mrs. Whitmore's business partner, buying into the boarding house with money she'd earned and saved. The divorce from Ezra had been finalized in August, quiet and amicable. She was courting a lawyer from Helena, now a quiet man who appreciated her sharp mind and sharper tongue. And Ezra and May had continued their careful dance, friendship deepening slowly into something more, conversations that stretched late into the evening, hands that brushed and lingered, looks that said more than words ever could. On December 15th, exactly 1 year after the rescue, Ezra asked May to walk with him. They climbed the hill behind the ranch house, the same hill where Ezra had once stood with Lynn discussing futures and possibilities. The winter sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. 1 year, Ezra said quietly. Seems impossible that it's only been a year. So much has changed, May agreed. Everything has changed, Ezra corrected. I was half alive before you came here, going through the motions, but not really living. You and Lynn, you brought life back to this place, to me. May looked at him, this good man who had saved them and then given them space to save themselves. You gave us our lives back, our freedom, our dignity. "You always had those things," Ezra said. "They were just buried under 7 years of cruelty. I just helped you remember." They were quiet for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. Then Ezra turned to face her. "May, I know you said you needed time, and I've tried to be patient. God knows I've tried. But I need to know, is there a future for us, or am I hoping for something that will never happen?" May's heart was pounding. She'd known this conversation was coming, had been preparing for it in her mind for months, but now that it was here, all her prepared speeches fled. "I love you," she said simply. "I have loved you for a long time, I think. Maybe from that first night when you wrapped us in your coat and promised we were safe. Maybe later when you helped birth that first foal and looked at me like I was capable of miracles. I do not know when it started, but I know it is real." Ezra's face lit up like sunrise. "Then what's stopping us?" "Fear," May admitted. "Fear that I am not enough, that I will disappoint you, that you will wake up one day and regret tying yourself to a Chinese refugee with no family and a past full of shame." "Stop," Ezra said firmly. He took her hands in his. "May Chen, you are the bravest, kindest, most capable woman I have ever met. You face down men twice your size. You save lives human and animal. You learned a new language, a new culture, built a business from nothing. There is nothing shameful in your past except what was done to you. And the fact that you survived it, that you came through it with your humanity intact, that just makes me love you more." "Love," May's voice came out as a whisper. "Love," Ezra confirmed. "I've been in love with you for months, maybe longer. I tried not to be, tried to remind myself you needed time, needed space, but the heart doesn't listen to logic." He smiled. "At least mine doesn't." May felt tears streaming down her face, happy tears for once. "I do not know how to do this, how to be with someone, how to trust that it will not be taken away." "Neither do I," Ezra admitted. "I've been alone for 6 years. I'm probably terrible at relationships. I snore. I forget to clean my boots before coming inside. I talk to horses more than people. But I'm willing to try if you are." "I am messy when I cook," May said, laughing through her tears. "I sing Chinese songs very badly when I think no one is listening. I cry at happy endings. I am terrible at sewing." "Sounds perfect to me," Ezra said. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. A kiss that tasted of hope and new beginnings and the courage it takes to choose love when fear feels safer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Was that all right?" Ezra asked. "That was more than all right," May said. "That was perfect." They stood on the hilltop as the last light faded from the sky, arms around each other, looking down at the ranch that had become home. In the distance, they could see the barn where life began and ended and began again, the cabin where 3 strangers had become a family, the land that now belonged to all of them. "Marry me," Ezra said suddenly. "Not for legal protection this time, not for immigration status, just because I love you and I want to build a life with you." May's breath caught. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "Then yes," May said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in February 1884 in a small ceremony at Reverend Webb's church in Helena. Lynn stood as maid of honor, radiant in a dress she'd sewn herself. Mrs. Whitmore provided the cake. Doc Harrison gave May away, since her father was an ocean away. Judge Brennan officiated, declaring that of all the marriages he'd performed, this one gave him the most satisfaction. The whole town came out for it. Chinese laborers May and Lynn had helped, ranchers who'd bought horses from Ezra, townspeople who'd been treated by May's healing hands. People who had come to see these 3 unlikely souls, Chinese refugees and a grieving cowboy, not as curiosities but as neighbors, as friends, as examples of what America could be at its best. After the ceremony at the reception held at Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house, Lynn pulled May aside. "Are you happy, sister?" she asked. May looked across the room to where Ezra was laughing with Judge Brennan, his eyes crinkling at the corners, his whole face alive with joy. She thought about the year and a half since that frozen night, about everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, everything they'd become. "I am happy," she said. "Truly happy." "Are you?" Lynn smiled. "I am. I have my own business, my own money, my own life. And soon maybe my own husband if Mr. Patterson finally gets the courage to propose." She laughed. "We have come far from that laundry yard, have we not?" "We have come impossibly far," May agreed. "Do you ever miss it?" Lynn asked. "China?" "Our old life." May considered the question seriously. "I miss Father sometimes, wonder if he is still alive, if he knows we survived. But miss that life, no. We were poor there. We would have been poor our whole lives. Here we have land. We have work that matters. We have freedom." "Freedom," Lynn repeated. "That is the word, is it not? Not wealth, not comfort. Freedom." 1 year later, autumn 1884. May stood in the doorway of the ranch house, one hand resting on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant with a daughter who kicked like a wild Mustang. Ezra insisted the baby would be a horse trainer before she could walk. The ranch stretched out before her golden in the afternoon light. 50 horses grazed in the near pasture. The barn Ezra had expanded last spring stood solid and proud. The clinic she'd built beside it saw a steady stream of patients. And walking up the road riding a pretty bay mare came Lynn. She visited every Sunday now, often bringing her husband James, the lawyer who'd won her heart with his quiet intelligence and complete lack of concern about what others thought of their mixed marriage. May waved, and Lynn waved back. Some things never changed. Some bonds were too deep to ever truly break. Ezra emerged from the barn, saw her standing there, and his face transformed with that smile that still made her heart skip. He walked to her, placed his hand over hers on her belly, felt their daughter kick. "She's strong," he said. "Like her mother," May replied. "Like both her mothers," Ezra corrected, nodding toward Lynn. "She'll have Aunt Lynn teaching her to be tough and independent." "And you will spoil her terribly," May said. "Absolutely," Ezra agreed without shame. Lynn dismounted, tying her horse to the post. She climbed the porch steps and embraced May carefully, mindful of the pregnancy. "How are you feeling, sister?" "Like I swallowed a watermelon that learned to dance," May said. Lynn laughed. "I brought you something. For the baby." She pulled out a small bundle of fabric. When May unfolded it, she found a tiny dress exquisitely embroidered with both Chinese and Western motifs. Dragons danced alongside wildflowers. Chinese characters for strength and joy intertwined with English words for the same. "Lynn, this is beautiful." "Two cultures," Lynn said. "Like our daughter will be, Chinese and American, neither one nor the other but both. Something new." They stood together on the porch, the three of them, soon to be 4, looking out at the land they'd claimed and the life they'd built. A life impossible to imagine on that frozen December night 2 years ago. "Do you remember," May said softly, "when we thought we were going to die in the snow, when we held each other and waited for the end?" "I remember," Lynn said. "I thought that would be the end of our story," May continued. 2 sisters from Guangdong frozen to death in a Montana blizzard. A sad story, a brief story. "But it was not the end," Lynn said. "It was the beginning." Ezra pulled both sisters close, this family they'd chosen rather than been born into. "Not just the beginning," he said. "The foundation. Everything we've built, everything we'll build, it all starts from that night. From the courage it took to run. From the will it took to survive. From the hope it took to trust a stranger." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold, 3 people stood together. 2 sisters who'd survived the unsurvivable, a man who'd learned that saving others could save himself, and between them, already loved beyond measure, a child who would grow up knowing that home wasn't a place you were born, but a place you chose to build. The story could have ended a dozen different ways. In a frozen field, in a labor camp, in deportation or despair. But instead it ended here, in warmth and safety and love. In a land that had tried to break them, but instead became theirs. Mei Chen, once a slave, now a landowner, a healer, a wife, soon to be a mother, free not just in law, but in spirit. And as the first stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, she placed both hands on her belly and whispered to her daughter, in a mixture of Chinese and English, "You will never be afraid the way we were afraid. You will never be powerless the way we were powerless. You will grow up free, little one, free to choose your own path, free to love who you choose, free to build your own dreams." Behind her, Ezra wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Tell her the rest," he murmured. May smiled. "And you will know your history, know the price that was paid for your freedom, know that your mother and your aunt walked through fire and ice to give you this life, so that you never forget the difference between the life we had and the life you will have, so that you use your freedom to help others find theirs." Lynn stepped closer, placing her hand over May's on her belly. "And know that family is not just blood. Family is whoever stands beside you in the storm, whoever refuses to let you face the darkness alone, whoever loves you not for what you can give them, but for who you are." The three of them stood in the gathering darkness, bound together by more than blood or law or even love. Bound by survival, by choice, by the knowledge that they had looked into the abyss and chosen to climb out rather than fall in. This was not the story of victims. This was the story of warriors, of women who refused to be broken, of a man who chose kindness over indifference, of a community that chose justice over profit. This was the story of America at its best. Not the myth of streets paved with gold, but the reality of hard-won dignity, of rights fought for and claimed, of freedom that came not as a gift but as a prize wrested from the jaws of cruelty. And above all this was the story of hope, hope that tomorrow could be better than today, hope that the powerless could become powerful, hope that even the coldest winter eventually yielded to spring. The Montana night settled around them, vast and star-filled and full of promise. Inside the house, dinner waited. Inside May's womb, life waited. Inside all their hearts, the future waited, and they were ready for it, together. Always together, but now each on their own terms, each whole, each free. The end of one story, the beginning of another.